Well, folks, Rod and I had talked about maybe getting out and telling some of our stories on the road, and just this week, we managed to get out and do that by heading up to West Virginia. What we're going to present for you today is the story of John Henry. And when we're done with this story, we're going to come back and have a little bit of a closing to this, wouldn't you say, Rod?
Yeah, I would guess that'd probably be the best way to kind of, tie all the loose ends together and bring it together as a little bit of a summary, so to speak.
All right, so without further ado, here we go. Railroads were vital to Appalachia, but building them in those mountains was hard, dirty work. Today we have machines to do the job of maintaining rail beds, but 150 years ago it was the work of men using mostly hand tools. Now, one of these men is memorialized here outside Talcott, West Virginia. That, folks, is our story today. Railroads were the lifeblood of Appalachia from right after the Civil War until well up into the 20th century. Trains were used to haul coal out of the mountains to markets around the world. Building these railroads was the job of men who dug and swung picks and hammers, laying twin ribbons of steel along mountain rivers and through the mountains themselves.
One of those men was the legendary John Henry, said to be a steel-driving man, a laborer who helped build railroad tunnels by hammering a steel drill into rock. This was a dangerous, exhausting job, but one that required incredible strength and precision. The legend says that John Henry was a freedman, likely born in the 1840s or 1850s, and worked on railroad projects after the Civil War. The most famous part of this story is the contest, a head-to-head battle between John Henry and, yes, a steam-powered machine.
Well, the story goes that John Henry took on the machine in a race to see who could drive steel faster. It's said that he won, but in doing so, he pushed himself too far and collapsed, dying with his hammer still in his hand. Several places claim to be the site of this legendary contest, but the most popular location is right here at the Big Bend Tunnel near Talcott, West Virginia. A statue of Henry stands there, and a festival is held there every year in his honor.
The statue is life-sized, showing John Henry with his hammer in his hand, just like the legend says. It's in John Henry Historical Park, right at the eastern end of the tunnel.
Now that we've shared the legend, let's look at the history. Rod, what do we know about the real John Henry?
Well, while the legend of John Henry has been told and retold in countless songs and stories, the story of the actual man is a bit murky. Researchers have spent decades trying to find out who the real John Henry was, if he even existed at all. One of the most prominent researchers, Scott Reynolds Nelson, believes that John Henry was real. Nelson traced a man named John William Henry, a convict laborer in Virginia, who worked on the construction of the Lewis Tunnel about 40 miles from the Big Bend Tunnel. Nelson found prison records that show that this John Henry was one of the first convicts assigned to tunneling work hired out to the C&O Railroad on a convict labor crew by the state under brutal conditions. It wasn't uncommon for prisoners to die from overwork, poor conditions, or even lung disease from the dust created by the drilling and blasting like the workers at the Hawk's Nest Tunnel.
Nelson's research suggests that John Henry might have died from this rather than collapsing in a single dramatic contest against a steam drill. He speculates that Henry might have come to Virginia looking for work cleaning up battlefields just after the Civil War, only to be arrested and jailed so that he could be used as convict labor.
The story of John Henry has been told in many different ways. Well, one of the most famous versions of the story is in a classic folk song, often performed as a blues ballad. It's also been told in paintings, books, plays, and even animated films. His story is about the struggle against industrialization as machines began to replace human labor.
Standing there at the site where his story was born really brings this legend to life. You can almost feel the history in the air, standing in the same spot where it said a real, life, steel-driving man fought against the machine and won. It's a powerful reminder of how folklore is still alive, and it's another one of the stories of Appalachia. Thanks so much for watching. Well, Rod, I don't know about you, but I enjoyed that trip over to West Virginia. I mean, I have never been to Talcott, and I had never been to the John Henry Memorial Park.
Likewise, I'd never had either, but I'd heard about at least a place that was in West Virginia that kind of celebrated this man as to what he did. But I was really impressed once I got there. It wasn't anything that was put together in any kind of cheap or demeaning way. It was very, very knowledgeable about some of the things that you found out about John Henry. And all of this credit should go to the unincorporated towns and their Ruritan Club. They were the ones that put all this together, and I think it was just fantastic. I mean, the statue was great. You got a chance to get right up to the tunnel and so forth, but it was just a wonderful day. I mean, the weather was great that day, too. I learned a lot about it. I learned a lot more than I ever knew.
Yeah, and folks, if you're wondering why we didn't stand there and tell you about this, I got a funny little story for you. A little bit of irony here. We talked about the competition between John Henry and the mechanical steel driving machine, okay? We're up there. Rod's taking some pictures and looking around. I'm kind of scouting the place out, and all of a sudden I hear a bang, bang, bang coming up the railroad tracks. Turns out we picked the very day that they were working on the tracks that ran right next to where we were. Mm-hmm. So if we'd been telling this story there, you wouldn't have heard us. You'd have heard a steel-driving machine.
Right. Actually, I think they were, grinding the rails down, I think a little bit probably for some, places maybe in the rails or something like that. But, it was loud. It was very loud, and we tried to do the best we could that day, but there was no way we were going to be able to overcome that noise.
No, absolutely not. But at least the crew got a kick out of our drone that we were flying. So There you go. Anyway, a great place, as Rod said, to go. If you get a chance, you need to head over that way. And a whole lot of other stuff in that area as well. We passed through, what was that, Bluestone Lake?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I found out a little about this town called Lily that it really turns out it wasn't under the lake, but they moved it because they had turned that into a national scenic river, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you can actually go up and visit the remains of that little town up there called Lily, West Virginia. We then went on to Alderson, mm-hmm. where the Alderson Lion was, and then ended up at the fanciest place I think I've ever seen.
Yep.
And what I'm talking about is what, Rod?
The Greenbrier, the famed Greenbrier.
Mm-hmm. And we got to get in and get some pictures, not inside, but some pictures of that humongous building they've got up there.
We really ought to thank the guy that let us go in there, too, because we pulled up, and I think the first thing that you asked was, is it okay if we take some pictures? And he said, you're not going to be long, just take some pictures. Sure, go ahead. And that was enough. But this facility is huge. Pictures, you see that, it doesn't do it justice. I mean, this is what people thought of probably the 50s and 60s up through the 70s when the Cold War was going on, and they thought, hey, what happens if our government gets disrupted in Washington? What are we going to do? Congress was supposed to meet there at the Greenbrier down in the lower levels, and it's kind of got a White House-esque sort of look to it. The Greenbrier does, but unfortunately they don't use that anymore. That's not a part of the plans if something like that, heaven forbid, ever happened. But still, it was just huge place, and this is also a place too that has hosted some PGA golf tournaments. I think it also hosted a NFL preseason camp for some of these teams that was up there, and also We got a little bit of the story about the time that I guess it was the wind came through there. You remember what is it called?
I do. Now, you might want to save that, though.
Okay.
Because we're going to be doing a story about the Greenbrier.
Okay, then I'll hold off on that. We'll just whet everybody's appetite with it, and we'll just stop right there then, okay?
John Henry, though, that was an excellent place to go. One thing that somebody said, and I remember trying to think where it was that I picked that up. Oh, I did a post on Facebook about John Henry. And somebody that had lived up there talked about how when the statue was up on the road, up above where it is now, that people would shoot it.
Right.
Like people are wont to do, just shoot something because it's there. And we actually went down there, and Rod, you looked around to see if you could see any dents from bullets.
Yeah, I went around several different directions around it. I found a bullet hole, I think, in the back. One that was a clear shot through there. I think there had been some other things that had maybe happened, knocking some of the paint or some of the finish off of the statue and so forth. But I at least witnessed at least a couple of, gunshots or at least shots that had been put through it. And there also was a little bit of damage, I think, on the left arm. There, as you come up and you look at it there from the face, you see a little bit of the crack and a little bit of the paint or something, the enamel coming off the statue. But, why people would do that, I don't know. But I guess, they feel like they have a point to prove. But it still didn't diminish to me the importance of that statue and why that statue was there and so forth. And that tunnel, I guess I'm kind of used to seeing tunnels around Southwest Virginia, and I don't think tunnels are maybe that big around here. I could be wrong, though. I really am not the kind of person who wants to go and get on the railroad tracks and go up to a tunnel, because you know how that sort of thing can go. But here, you could go up to the tunnel, and you could go up to the face of this tunnel. It was huge. I mean, this was a huge tunnel there, and and right through the mountain. Incredible. And on the other side, that's where the guys with the railroad, they were working, going through another tunnel that was right beside of the Great Bend Tunnel.
Absolutely. And folks, we've been, I think this is our second trip through West Virginia.
Yep.
So we're going to have to find some other places. And I know everybody wants us to go up to Harper's Ferry, and we're looking at doing that when the weather gets warmer. Mm-hmm. But if you all have any suggestions of places you'd like to see, things you'd like us to talk about and go out and visit, let us know down in the comments. We'd love to know. Give us some ideas to take a vacation. How about that?
That'd be cool. But okay, it's got to be about Appalachia though, and it's got to be within the. We're not going to Belize or any place like that. We'd like to go to Belize, but still, we're
talking about Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, West Virginia, South Carolina, Pennsylvania, that area that would be Appalachia, basically.
Yeah, that would, and that area right there, the area holds. We've just scratched the surface with a lot of these stories in some of these locales and so forth, and I think we could really come up with some great ones if we really get some hints, some ideas from some of you out there about where we could go and what we could be looking for. And who knows, maybe your story idea or your general idea might make it onto one of our videos or our recorded podcast.
Absolutely. Well, Ron, I guess it's time to wrap this thing up. And we'll wrap it up by saying that we're also thinking about maybe doing some live streams in conjunction with these videos that we go out and gather out on the road. Mm-hmm. Let us know what you think about that. Okay? But until then, y'all take care. So long, everybody.
So long.